Once I picked up Hegel's Phenomenology of Spirit in a library. I don't even know if that's how you say it. Who cares? And I picked it up and I opened the page because I've seen this book everywhere on the memes and all that, the philosophy book. And I read the first page and I thought, what the hell is this guy saying? What is he on about? And it sort of disheartened me because I saw everyone reading this book online and I thought, well, I don't even understand the first page. And the same thing happened actually with Karl Marx's Das Kapital and Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. I picked those books up and started reading them, just trying, and I had not a clue what they were saying. It was as if it was a different language. How can this be understood by people? But I knew it was. People understood this stuff. People could pick these books up and read them and actually get something out of them and interpret them. And I was thinking, how is that possible? It's almost gibberish. And now in hindsight, I realize I was doing it wrong. And you might be too. You might be reading these books incorrectly and having the wrong frame of mind. So I'd like to introduce you to the idea of superficial reading. And this is, if we recall the 4 levels of reading, this falls in the category of inspectional reading, which is being able to understand what a book is about at a glance. And it's sort of part of that. Superficial reading, it's called. And when we hear the word superficial, we think we have negative connotations with it. We think, well, superficial means shallow and surface level. And yes, it is that, but this is not a bad thing at all. And we can actually wire our minds into understanding why superficial reading can actually be excellent for tackling difficult books such as Wealth of Nations or for difficult philosophy titles, for example. Books that you pick up and just don't get, and you don't understand them, and you have to look up stuff every page, and you don't know what they're talking about. And that's what we're going to learn in this video, hopefully. So you can take that and apply it to difficult books and get something out of them and not be disheartened by them. And it's the common struggle we all feel. So the first piece of advice that goes with that is you cannot expect too much from your first reading of the book. When you open a difficult book that you know is hard and it's not really easy to comprehend, you shouldn't expect to understand everything in one go, because you won't. Great books, the greatest books of the Western canon, are not meant to be understood within one read through. For example, the Bible. If you read the Bible cover to cover, you're going to understand a lot probably, because some things are easy to understand. But there are people who have studied the Bible for literally decades, literally since they were children until the day they die, and they still don't get it in the full sense. Because books like that you can't exhaust them just a few times. You have to constantly reread them and always extract new pieces of understanding that you would never have seen in the past before. And that's really in the essence of what makes a great book. So if you are picking up one of these fantastic books and you're not understanding them immediately, well, then it's because you're not supposed to. Damn it, you can't expect to do that. So it's okay to actually read a book from cover to cover and only feel like you've gotten a little bit out of it, a little bit more understanding, a bit of enlightenment, because that's fine. You're not going to understand all of it. And the more you reread them, which you will inevitably, and you should, as your mind is more mature and you've read other books and you've had new experiences, then you have these different lenses to see the book through, and you'll understand it more. So that's the first sort of change to your frame of mind that you should have, to apply superficial reading without feeling depressed over it and feeling like you're stuck in your reading journey. So now, how do we actually go about doing that? How do we apply superficial reading to our books? How do you apply this? Well, it can be summed up neatly. When reading difficult books, start and finish them without stopping to think about any of the difficult stuff in the way. Ignore the footnotes, ignore commentaries, don't look up stuff you don't know, don't stress out over not knowing things. Just read the book from the beginning to the end without stopping to focus on what you don't know. It's that simple. And instead you can reframe that in a more positive light and say, well, I'm going to read this book from beginning to end and focus on what I do know. Focus on the parts in between the difficult parts that I do know, this sweet spot area. And if we can do that, then we've done superficial reading, because we've ignored the difficult stuff and focused on what we do know. And at the end of the day, we've increased our understanding of the book. Maybe it's not much. Maybe it's 1% of the book we understood, but that 1% is 1% more than nothing. And that is so much, that's more valuable than not reading it in the first place. Some people give up at the beginning and say, well, I can't read this, I'll quit. Whereas the people who push through with superficial reading and only understand 10% of the book are still more wise than they were at the beginning. So if you can apply this method to your books, then you will understand more and you will get better at reading, because it's challenging, it's tough, it's almost disheartening in the moment, but if you can do that, it's really just fulfilling. And I like to use an example of this because I've already told you about what I did with earlier with the difficult books. But for example, say you're a student reading Macbeth in English class, whatever, any other book. And for you, it's quite hard at the time. It's not really easy to see the main narrative. And let's say your teacher, instead of reading it all the way through with you, your teacher tells you to read Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, but in between each act, she says, okay, let's stop and read some commentaries, let's stop and analyze some quotations or do this and that and all this crap, right? Okay, well, by the time you've done those notes and understood Act 1 and move on to Act 2, you've forgotten, or rather, by the time you're at the end of the book, you've forgotten what happened in Act 1. Because you kept stopping. You kept stopping and focused on the details that don't really matter. And in focusing on the details, you lose sight of the whole plot. You forget the beginning, you forget the underlying plots, the story, you forget the main points, the main arguments, because you're focused on the small detail and the 1% you didn't understand. And that can just ruin the whole book for you, because the main message the author was giving to you is gone. You've forgotten it because you were hung up in the details and you were afraid of what you didn't know. And superficial reading helps you avoid that. So next time you pick up a difficult book, try to ignore and not be disheartened by the fact that it's difficult, but just read it all the way through. Don't stop. Focus on what you do know, ignore what you don't know, ignore the footnotes, the commentaries, and then at the end just think, well, I learned something anyway, and the next time I read it, I'm going to be able to understand more because I'm a better reader and I'm wiser and more mature, and I have all these different perspectives. That's what you should be reading. You keep in mind while you're reading. And that's really the core message. Superficial reading, it's good, use it, apply it, it's great, it's going to help you. Amazing. Thank you.